Knights of the Earth 1. The Unspoken Crusade by Martin Kreider. Chapter 1. 1034 hours. November 3rd, 2203. UNEDF Standard Calendar. Scutum Centaurus Arm. Acronis System. Planet Zekron. Kurawan Plaza. The Senator is dead. I repeat, Senator Zeratan is dead. Private Kurt Ranston shouted, seeking help as humans and Arizons ran wildly from the scene. His tanned face was dripping with sweat. It was impossible to see the stress under his helmet. He was getting hot in his brown uniform, even though the average temperatures on the purple planet were much colder than on Earth. It was his second week on Zekron. The short and slim farm boy from Texas was always dreaming of becoming a professional locksmith. As a child, he broke locks with a starter pack from his grandfather at his parents' house. He enjoyed replacing them with better ones, too, without telling his parents. But his dream had quickly faded when 3 months ago, as with any 18-year-old, he received a letter to enlist in the UNEDF. Even in times of peace, conscription remained. However, Kurt did not worry too much. His stationing on Zekron after basic training was a safe place to be, serving only a year after he could return to Earth. But an assassination on Arizon's senator in the middle of the plaza of the capital of the Purple Planet complicated his situation. He looked around frantically. From the corner of his eye, he saw a long pipe sticking out of the window of a large apartment building. When he turned his gaze to the spot that he'd spied, the window was no longer open. One shot, clear through the head, noted his comrade, Private First Class Fernando Rodriguez. The usually fidgety Spaniard knelt with his broad-shouldered body stiffly next to the politician's body and tried to analyze the burned wide hole in Arizon's skull. It was steaming a little. "I've informed the captain and the medics," he clarified. "Shit." Kurt liked to listen to the radio, but he didn't know too much about the politics. He exclusively listened to the dramatic audio stories divided into episodes about detectives and superheroes. Still, he assumed that this assassination would make a big headline in the interplanetary newspaper and radio station's United System Gazette. Senator Zeratan had as many supporters as he did enemies. The two digitigrade legs of an ant-like body twitched a little on the purple floor of the plaza until the chubby people's representative succumbed to his injuries. His dark green blood, stemming from the severed laceration to the back of his head, stained the ground and seeped through the cracks in the polished stone. When Captain Miller arrived on the scene with a handful of Arizon soldiers and human dispatchers, the mustachioed Texan recognized the stress in the middle-aged, clean-shaven man's wrinkles. Miller was a round-bellied man of Earth who viewed his job moderately calmly and without much excitement. "Lock the place down. Cover the body for now. Peterson, contact the mothership. Have them relay the info to Earth as soon as possible," he explained. "Before the media gets a hold of us." The captain drank his coffee in silence as he watched the soldiers cover the dead man. In seconds, paramedics arrived and subsequently removed the lifeless body. Miller stared at Kurt and Fernando. He gestured for the two soldiers to join him. The Spaniard quickly thought of an excuse for the event over which he had no control. Kurt, on the other hand, was counting on dismissal or even a prison sentence at that second. The bald man inhaled deeply. "You look like you've seen a cat-for-wolf mating," the captain joked. "I know it probably looks bad when two human soldiers are standing by the corpse of an Arizon senator. Nothing will happen to you here. There's nothing that you could have done anyway." Kurt bristled at the thought, wondering if it was a relief to know that neither of them were suspects for the time being. "Do you know where the shot came from?" asked Fernando as he adjusted his helmet. The faces of the two soldiers could not be seen behind the accompanying mask with an elongated visor. "We don't know anything yet, but the wound looked like it happened with one of our weapons," Miller concluded promptly, "as long as my eyes don't deceive me." "From there, I think. From the window up there," the Texan interjected as he pointed to the tall building. The other two men, too, faced the direction, taking in the clean architecture of the planetary capital city. "This could be bad for us. If the shooter was human, then maybe there could be a altercation. Might be a bit of a stretch, but we shouldn't rule anything out," Miller said, frowning. "Anyway, you're excused for the rest of the day." The two brothers in arms saluted and decided to stroll through the market. The buildings around them rose high into the sky, built of smoothly polished purple stones, for purple was the most prominent color on Zekron. The sand, the tiles, the rocks, at least in the sand regions to the east of the planet. Merely the green grasslands in the west resembled Earth. The sea and lakes radiated a green glow. Kurt enjoyed the smell every time he walked through the market. For the most part, the pleasant atmosphere was provided by the Arizon Sedina tree. Its soft blue wood emitted a penetrating honey-like odor that kept customers spiriting up in stressful situations to a minimum. Fernando noticed that he and Kurt were drawing angry looks. He tapped his shoulder. They must think that we did it. Kurt kept an eye out for a snack bar that they'd recently begun visiting regularly at the end of their shifts. I don't blame them. A group of uniformed Arizons became aware of the two and watched them silently. The two humans entered the snack bar, and the uniformed aliens mumbled among their ranks. Kurt greeted the snack bar owner with a handshake. Out so early already, my friends, the overweight Arizon shouted, full of energy. You guessed right, Hartax, but we all don't think the reason is nice, Kurt claimed as he and Ferdinand sat down in the far corner of the small snack bar. They took off their helmets and associated masks and laid them on the table. I know. They interrupt the interview with curl tur for this. They're not telling anything else right now. Hartax searched for his rusty radio to give his two guests the proof. What they heard were eyewitness accounts sweeping relatives and theses of conspiracy theorists. Didn't even leave alone my sports channel, the wide ant complained. Fernando beamed with curiosity and couldn't help but ask the owner about his opinion. Hartax, you don't think that it was us, do you? The big Arizon slowly turned on his bar stool, staring at the two humans. So, you admit it. I knew it was you, Hartax accused them as he approached menacingly. Fernando missed a heartbeat and got scared like never before. His hand became sweaty. Kurt tussled through his short black hair as he glanced around fleetingly to make sure that no other customer heard the accusation. His serious, threatening look turned into a grin that grew wider and wider. He laughed heartily and clicked his two mandibles, which protruded along his cheeks, to the corners of his mouth. He placed his two hairy and armored hands, each with 4 fingers, on the human's shoulders. I'm just about kidding. It definitely wasn't you guys, and besides, I didn't like the guy anyway. Why mourn for politicians? They're all the same anyway. The soldiers exhaled deeply and laughed together. You gave us a scare there, Fernando gulped with relief. I'll never forget that moment. Anyways, let's forget it. You're not here to talk politics. You're here to eat. Hartax searched for his clipboard in his many-apron pockets, ultimately found it, and wrote something on a blue paper. What's the meal of the day? Fernando asked eagerly. Fried Kodama ironbird with potatoes, Hartax quickly yelled. Kurt was surprised to hear the name of his favorite tuber from home. You're offering earthly foods now? Kurt asked intently. Well, sure. More and more people are moving near to the capital, so they can't feed on the local grub every time, the Arizon explained. Sounds logical to me. I'll take that then. My first order of human food. I can't wait to see if it tastes like it does on the blue planet, the snack owner said happily. That's when Kurt spotted sliced deep-fried potatoes on the menu. Freeze. That's called fries, though, Hartax, Kurt noted. The wide ant snatched the card from the human and took a good look at the mistake. Hey, a little indulgence, please. Now I can have all of this reprinted again. Write the bill to the UNEDF, Kurt quipped. The two humans clearly knew Hartax was joking because his heart was as big as his pouch. The black-haired man liked to look around his restaurant. Picture frames with autographed uniforms of famous athletes of the planet decorated the walls, but equally personal pictures of Hartax's family hung everywhere. When Kurt and Fernando ate at the restaurant for the first time in their introductory days of their deployment to the plaza, they were the first visitors of the day. The snack bar would have closed in 4 minutes, but since since Hartax rarely had humans under his roof, he turned his stove back on just for the two of them and cooked his best meal for the sake of the two soldiers. The three got to talk together late into the night while eating the local food and sharing stories. Although this would have gotten the two soldiers in trouble, Captain Miller of the UNEDF enclave on Zakron let their night talk slide because he remembered that Fernando and Kurt were working overtime that day. In the dialogue with Hartax, they learned that as a young scion, he lost his big brother in the First Contact War 45 years ago, a dispute that lasted many months. Hartax named his place in honor of his brother, the fallen warrior. The Wide Ant never held a grudge against the Earthlings like other of his species did. The followers of Zalia's grace, a widespread religion of the Arizons who worshipped the two asteroid rings of Zekron, were passed through by human ships at the First Contact, which was considered a massive insult. Mankind imparted them with technology that simplified and improved the lives of the backward inhabitants of the Purple Planet. At the time, compared to the Earth, the people of Zekron were still stuck in the 19th century. Many Arizons took the humans to their heart and thanked them for the progress that they brought. But there was always the side of people, mainly old veterans, who agitated against the Earthlings. Hartax, on the other hand, loved them because the equipment he got improved his life by worlds. As Hartax strutted into the kitchen to prepare the food, Kurt jutted his head briefly toward the door, which was kicked open loudly. This drew the attention of the diner's customers to the group of uniformed Arizons. At first glance, they did not appear as gang members. They were too nobly dressed. Kurt had seen the red triangular symbol on their uniforms before on propaganda posters, but he can't remember on what context they were shown. The foremost Arizon turned out to be an officer. His two antennae protruded from the noble headgear, which was comparable to the human officer's peaked cap. My fellow citizens, in the name of the great party leader, Zetus Ron Shek, of our glorious party of interplanetary Zekronian independence, we are now here in this difficult time to protect our dear countrymen from further attacks. Have you seen any humans around? We are currently conducting interviews to find the potential killer of the recently deceased and highly respected politician Zuritan. The articulate officer spoke clearly to the crowd. Immediately, Kurt retrieved his head. He and Fernando merely heard the monologue, but they could not see the entrance from the back row. The last few seats were separated by a wall. The proud American began to sweat again. Jerkily, it became uncomfortably hot in the thick brown uniform of his. He tickled his black mustache and rested his hand on his helmet. Why is all of this happening today? The black-haired Spaniard whispered. Hartax furiously left the kitchen and approached the entrance. Who the heck wants to know that? You Izzies really don't have anything better to do you? Your presence is scaring away my clientele, he shouted. Some of the guests appeared scared and whispered something to each other. The officer ordered his men to search the restaurant. Hartax, on the other hand, tried to prevent them from doing so until a customer stood up. I saw two humans of the UNE. Before he could finish his sentence, Hartax intervened again. There are no humans here. Get lost already. The officer eyed him and pushed the Wide Horizon aside with a sadistic look on his face. He fell and bumped his abdomen on a stool. Loyal patrons stood up from the back rows and threw fork-like utensils at the troublemakers. Get out! Nobody hurts Hartax and gets away with it! A larger-than-average Arizon yelled. The soldiers of the Izzy group were keen to point the guns at them, but their officers stopped them. He didn't want to make too big of a fuss in a simple restaurant. The party members held their arms with natural chitin armor in front of their faces to protect themselves from the storm of spiky tools. They left the store in a hurry. Kurt immediately rushed to Hartax and spotted an Arizon who had long since helped him, fulfilling Kurt's intent. I'm so sorry, Hartax. We should have stepped forward. Hartax, now seated, covered the wound on his abdomen. No. I couldn't have let those fanatics drag you off. The bigger Arizon snatched the first aid kit from the wall and ran to his friend. He doctored his wound. These Izzies are certainly using their opportunity to divide our people. But we will not fall for this trap, encouraged the doctor. Some left the snack bar. The injured diner owner knew the consequences if they had gotten their hands on them. "Food is on the house. Take it with you. The nice family there will address the fanatics there. Take the back way out." The injured aunt couldn't take his eyes off the shop window. "Hortax, I don't want to hear anything. Good luck, and I hope you get home safe. Now go. I can see them returning." Kurt and Fernando, out of respect, left double the amount on the counter for the menu they ordered and quickly fled through the back door in the kitchen. They could only hear the prominent voice of the officer from before until the closed. Kurt and Fernando, out of respect, left double the amount on the counter for the menu they ordered and quickly fled through the back door in the kitchen. They could only hear the prominent voice of the officer from before until the door closed behind them. Fleet Admiral Byfield had trimmed his silver hair with fresh gel, at least the ones he still had left. His full beard sparsely covered half of his long scar, which extended to his left eye. He gazed at the numerous colorful deep-sea fish of the underwater world through thick windows. He entered his noble office. The artificial light from the overhead lamps in his office shone far brighter than the sparse light of his small bathroom, reflecting as clearly as sun rays on the ocean water against the shiny and wrinkled chestnut-colored skin. The pneumatic tube shot into his office space via one of the many pipes, all of which were connected to departments, usually military, that were part of his jurisdiction. He had lit a smoking pipe as he opened the mail. An appointment for another monotonous council meeting. Most meetings dealt with economic issues, so the Admiral often felt out of place. But this one was different. The murder of an important political figure assassinated with the weapons issued by the UNEDF. The silver-haired man put on his reading glasses and stood up from his padded chair, hoping that he had not read conscientiously. Such a headline could cause unpleasant conflict, but his old eyes did not blind him. He put on his heavy jacket, studded with all the silver and gold medals. He ran out of his office and walked past his secretary, Sergeant Fontaine. "Fleet Admiral? What's the hurry?" he asked the old man burningly. The old man turned and tossed him the pneumatic tube on the wooden desk. Fontaine read through it, but before he could say anything, the veteran was already in the elevator, which reached compartments that lay as much as 4 kilometers below the ocean floor. Byfield closed the elevator doors and was ready to go on the journey to the council building. A few minutes later, the door opened again. What welcomed him were massive armored fighting vehicles of the new Lobster type, shaped like a glorified semicircle, equipped with experimental weapon devices fresh from the laboratories that had been established in the level beneath them, where the brightest minds on the earth were developing new inventions for modern warfare, though they lived in times of peace. Byfield heard fast footsteps approaching from behind him. It was the much younger Fontaine. "Are the news true?" the sergeant asked. "Everything that comes through the tube is true," Byfield clarified, who stopped before one of the new tanks, square-shaped moving fortresses made out of 8-inch thick reinforced steel as tall as a 2-story building, equipped with the latest diesel propulsion of the modern day, stood lined up along the gigantic wall. They were recently equipped with modern Tesla coils, which gave the power drive an added boost, making them fastest on the battlefield. "It's going to be all right. Stolen weapons for sure," Byfield surmised as he asked Fontaine to light the contents of his pipe. Exclusively high members of both species knew the projects the scientists were developing deep beneath the Earth's ocean. Besides them, trusted citizens, families of researchers, and powerful companies had access to the residencies and markets above the water of the ocean base. These were approached daily by merchant ships from space. It was a secret military station which whereabouts were unknown to ordinary people. Byfield ultimately stood before the council building and wished farewell to his sergeant. He watched the wide, turning steel gears at the wall as they unlocked the building's colossal gates before him. Stepping inside, he showed his ID to the receptionist and handed over his heavy jacket. The formally dressed secretary, wearing a brown tailored suit and a ponytail, operated a lever that directed a synchronized clacking and clashing of gears. The prominently bigger gates in front of him opened sluggishly, and a wide, dense haze of water vapor met him. He walked through the clouds, which slowly subsided, and discovered a large hall reminiscent of an opera house. "Late again," complained the silhouette of a pompous, slim old man in a lab coat. His prominent Dutch accent, heard through the settling cloud, immediately made Byfield clear that it was the chief scientist of Project Protector, Luc Visser. "Had some work to do," the Admiral explained. "And it certainly consisted of smoking the pipe until you dropped dead." Byfield overheard the accusation with a laugh until Visor used the titanium prosthetic arm to extinguish the fire of his tobacco pipe. "In the moment, the most powerful leaders of this world will stand before you. Act accordingly. Also, I told you to quit smoking. You told me that the stuff I was smoking was no good, so I took a different kind," Byfield explained to the bald man. "Extraterrestrial herb, straight out of the pharma." Visor slowly shook his head. A bell rang, indicating that all the participants were ready to turn on their remote communication devices. From the many indentations in the wall of the hexagonal room, several round loudspeakers extended into the room, from which the voices of the other participants could be heard at any moment. A projector with countless lenses on it was lowered from the ceiling and into the center of the hall, which then shone through a reflector. This light projected images on the faces of the other participants. Each time, Byfield was surprised by the fact that he could witness a time when portraits of world leaders would speak to him in the same room. The old admiral placed himself on a platform and adjusted the microphone to his height. He waited until each of the big faces on the walls rang above them. This would signal him that all members had made the connection and were ready to participate in the meeting. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this council meeting on time. I assume you have read the message, and I can save myself and you the trouble of explaining it again," Byfield said to the most powerful people on Earth. "These big ants must want war again," shouted Mary III, Queen of Great Britain, fierily into the council. "We need to plan our next steps well, or everything could escalate again. We should not repeat the mistakes of our predecessors," clarified John C. Hamilton, President of the United States of America. "But what if it was an Arizon with the weapons stolen from the UNEDF warehouse?" speculated Melkul Smith, President of the United Republic of South Africa. "It must have been terrorists," interjected the Russian Tsar Anton Petrovich II. Byfield hated talking to these people. With the UNCP, a union between most of the countries on Earth was possible. It limited conflicts on the planet by an enormous rate, at the price that some of the rulers mostly behaved like big children that tried to compensate for their small power loss. "Terrorists are also suspected by our intelligence. We can't do much yet except investigate," Byfield declaimed. "We don't yet know if the sniper acted alone or if he had an employer. The Zekar Keltex is committed to peace between us. He would never have wanted the death of Senator Zaratan, even if he was part of the Easy," held Gabriel Durand, the French president. Zekor was the title that most Arizons revered. In the language that the inhabitants of the planetary capital city of Zerlodia spoke, Zekor meant Lord of the People. To become a Zekor, one had to achieve the vote of at least 90% of the delegates to the Grand Council of Zerlodia. Each province on Zarkon provided 5 delegates to represent their respective interests. Accordingly, it was not easy to achieve this status, but if one was successful at becoming a Zekor, they would have had the majority of Arizon population on one side, who held fast to the old traditions, for the Zekar's word was law. "Zeratan may have been a member of Easy, but there is no reason for Zekar to kill the senator. Let's face it, Keltax is the nicest Arizon I know," roared the German Emperor Frederick von Kranz. "What if they were simply terrorists?" the Queen of Britain asked. "We can't make assumptions and submit them to the Zekar without any proof. We would need to send a representative to show them that we don't want war in any case," the President of the USA suggested. "This is precisely why Professor Visser graces our meeting," Byfield said as he invited the bald Dutchman to the podium. All the rulers knew and respected him as he personally mentored the best fighters of the many countries for Project Protector. For thanks to Visor's work, humanity ended and won the first contact war against the Arizons with minor losses on the human side. With his action, he forced the ant-like people to capitulate, preventing genocide. Visser bowed and adjusted the microphone to his above-average height. For this investigation, I chose the Swedish knight Felix Joberg. His ability to see unpredictable connections and remain manipulated and charismatic during interrogations are good criteria to solve this kind of case. The majority of the participants did not condemn his qualified decision. There would always be someone against it. Why the Swedish one, our knight, did better in the intelligence test, Queen Mary complained loudly. Visor remained professional and matter-of-fact. He was respected by many and did not always have to justify his decisions. He knew his subject matter. I am the only one who knows my knights better than anyone else here in this meeting, Your Highness, he said. And besides, wasn't it the second-generation Swedish knight who sacrificed himself for your life in 2199? If you remember the attack on the Kelly during your state visit to the planet Forma, he added, you must accept the professor's choice. The fleet admiral interjected before the situation escalated. Queen Mary reluctantly conceded defeat. Getting involved in the conversation she couldn't win in front of all the other rulers silenced her raspy voice. When it became uncomfortably soundless again, Byfield cleared his throat and approached the microphone. Thank you for taking the time to attend this session. I will contact you immediately upon initial results. The war veteran waited for the other members to disconnect and flipped a switch that caused the lights to travel back into the ceiling afterwards. The speakers disappeared inside the wall. The podium sank into the floor and the microphone along with it. Byfield turned to the professor. I'm getting too old for this. I'm looking forward to my retirement, the decorated veteran sang as he again retrieved his tobacco pipe from his back pocket and searched for his lighter. Visser wheeled and installed a gas lighter out of his titanium prosthetic and helped Byfield light the contents of his pipe. I need one of those, he sighed. It'll cost you an arm and phantom pain. I'll pass then. The two old men said goodbye to the receptionist at the head of the great gate and waited for the massive doors to open. This news will spread quickly. They don't know it already. Information travels fast through the radios, the scarred American concluded. The Dutch scientist nodded. Felix can do it. Yes, I'm sure he can. Just because he is new doesn't mean he's doing a bad job. You're right, look. The loss of the knight is always unfortunate, Byfield said. And they're expensive, too. As the two left the council building, Visser immediately strolled in the direction of his lab until he heard the loud words of his old friend behind him. If it comes to war, then I must take part in it. I know you've quit drinking, but let's have one last drink the night we leave then. Visser pretended not to hear the words through all the noise of the transport trucks.